our very irregular podcast for Never Ending Realm. Thank you, though, for being such great fans, liking the page, and following the Facebook group. So that's great. We're up, I think we're at a new record, about 35,000 members in the Facebook group. So, yeah, pretty cool.
Actually, no, Facebook group might actually be at 40,000, I think.
Oh, okay. Wow, yeah. But
I mean,
make sure you check it out.
The JRPG group, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get started, I guess, with kind of what the big gaming news is. I know you're excited about the new Zeldas, guys.
Indeed.
Yeah.
That's Zelda's always been. It's always exciting. It might be the one franchise that has never lost its appeal to me.
Yes.
For like at least 30 years, so that's a big time. That's a long time. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yes, it's interesting because Breath of the Wild came out in 2017. It's just had its 6th year anniversary, isn't it? Which is,
yeah.
I mean, I'd say Skyward Sword came out in 2011, didn't it? So that was a 6-year gap as well. So now it's Tears of the Kingdom, the 6-year gap. But I mean, the one thing that I'm really looking forward to, and I have been for a while, is an actual voice-acted Ganondorf. I think we've always imagined how he actually sounds in a game. And although it seems to be a bit of a mystery as to who is actually voicing him, because I think a lot of people have an idea who it is, but it's not been confirmed.
Who are people saying that it is?
A lot of people are saying it's Matt Mercer. He's voiced people like Trafalgar Law and One Piece and I think someone from Demon Slayer. But to me, on first sound, he sounded a bit like Patrick Seitz, who's someone who I've desperately wanted to voice Ganondorf. So he's done quite a lot of roles in anime. He's done My Hero Academia. He's done One Piece as well. And I think he's done Dragon Ball Super. So he just sounds like a perfect Ganondorf. So it sounds a bit like him. I'm harboring hopes that it might be him, but a lot of people saying it's a guy called Matt Mercer. So let's see.
Okay. Yeah, I saw the previews. Do you guys remember what day that's coming out, or they have not announced the day yet? Just
May the 12th.
May the 12th. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
that's pretty close, actually.
Yeah, it's about just over 2 months.
Yeah.
So, what do you foresee? Do you foresee a bigger reception than Breath of the Wild, or more tempered? And I mean by critically speaking. Because Breath of the Wild did very well critically. Like, it still holds a 97 Metacritic.
It does, yeah. I mean, with Breath of the Wild, I think I've always been of this opinion that it's a phenomenal game and everything, but Nintendo have used it as a bit of a testing ground for something a lot bigger. And I think Tears of the Kingdom is that thing that's supposed to be a lot bigger, because obviously you had all these criticisms such as there's not much of a story, it's all set in the past, and it's just been focused on the open world, which is obviously it's a phenomenal open world. But I'd say, based on what we're seeing, there's obviously open world there, but there's a lot more of a story to it. So which is why I think the excitement level is quite higher. And are you familiar with these leaks that happened recently with the art book?
Well, I always try, at least for Zelda, I usually always try not to read into the story because I want to be surprised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I was just asking the question because this would be, if I'm not mistaken, the second time that Zelda has a direct sequel.
Yes.
The first one was Ocarina of Time, and then we have Majora's Mask, which was a direct sequel.
Indeed,
to it.
yeah.
And the reception for Majora's Mask was great, but it was not quite what it was for Ocarina of Time.
True.
Because, obviously, Ocarina of Time was more revolutionary, I guess, in 1998 than the other one was in 2000. So I that's what I was asking, because I feel that maybe even if it's just as good, people already were so impressed by Breath of the Wild that maybe we will get a lower Metacritic score, but still in the 90s. I would be surprised if it doesn't break the 90s. So because Zelda always does. So I still think it's going to be a very high scoring game. But I was asking because of that.
I think that if they kind of retool a little bit the weapons breaking, so you don't have to spend so much time with that, I think that could definitely help people like it more. Then also, everyone, did you guys? Well, you saw the trailers. There's the glider now, so there's going to be a lot more options for movement and things like that.
The glider used to be there before too. That was one of the things that now you can fly. Now you can go up in the sky into I guess the floating islands and stuff. But the glider was there before, so I just don't know how it would be different. I guess this time you could fly for longer periods of time. I assume because the gliding mechanic was the best things that Breath of the Wild did. Even Horizon Forbidden West has a glider now.
Yeah.
So, because it makes traversing the land a lot easier. Like if you jump from a peak and you glide down, it's a lot easier than just running down the mountain. And so no, I'm excited, but a lot of Zelda still kind of shrouded in mystery because Nintendo likes to do that. They're not big on unveiling everything, which is good, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting because you've had 4 trailers now, and we don't really know much from. I mean, all we know is that yes, Ganondorf is back. And the world's kind of falling apart. Well, not falling apart, but you have these sky islands coming up, and you have, in the latest trailer, Hyrule just looking a lot more like Mordor from Lord of the Rings. So
that's what Nintendo does. They always do that with Zelda. Because even back in the day, I don't know if Mont remembers, because you're younger than us, but Ocarina's Time in the magazines, you remember that there was a lot of screenshots and stuff that never really happened. Or they were it turned out to be very different in the final game from what was shown in the magazine. Well,
even some of the character designs were a little bit different from what,
Yeah, so Nintendo kind of does that all the time.
It takes me back to some cherished times when instead of trailers and Nintendo Directs, we had to wait once a month for the Nintendo magazine to come out and to see screenshots and speculation on that. I mean, although I think that age I was probably in elementary school, or we call it primary school in the UK, but yes.
Yeah, no, but Nintendo's always done that, so I guess, I have high expectations. Let me say that.
Speaking of Nintendo, there's actually a topic, which is a question for the viewers, that actually one of the other moderators in the JRPG fans group asked. It's not 100% JRPG related, but he noted that on March 10th is Mario Day, and so he was just asking if we could ask the viewers. Oh, yes, nice. Yeah, I can't find my Mario hat that I got at that video game museum. It must be in my car somewhere. But, so Jason was wondering if the viewers wanted to recommend what Mario game you should buy, hopefully on sale on Mario Day. So, I don't know. So let's just ask, what do you guys think the best Mario game is?
Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. So I'd say it's an interesting one because I'd say Mario Odyssey is one of the best made games I've ever played. Based on how slick the gameplay is and just how smooth everything works. And I know naturally it goes back to Mario 64, but this might be a very controversial take here, but I'd say Mario 64 is not a game that's aged well. I mean, I played it.
I can see the hate mail already coming. The inbox is full.
I mean, I'd say I'm not saying it because it's a bad game. I still love the game. I've got so many cherished memories of Mario 64, but I'm talking from more of a gameplay perspective in terms of maybe because it's a bit different on the Switch, the actual controls. Because I played it again on the Switch when the not the remake, but the anniversary edition came out in 2020.
Okay.
Plus playing it in a pandemic time. So I'd say I just found it that the actual gameplay itself or the controls were a bit more complicated than I actually remember. So that's why I'm saying it from that context that it might have aged a bit not as well. But don't get me wrong, I love the game.
So your pick is Odyssey. Odyssey would be your pick.
I would say yes, Odyssey.
Okay. So I'll go. Well, I have to agree that Odyssey is probably the most polished Mario at this point. And it has a lot of elements. Like even has 2D sections where you go and it's 2-dimensional, and it's just a larger game. So if for newcomers, I would say, because my kid is 6 years old and he loves Odyssey.
Okay.
And he he can get moons. He has every time he plays, he seems to find moons. Even after beating the game. So it's and it's really it even has parts where it kind of serves as tribute to other Mario games that came before it.
Oh yes.
So yeah, I think Odyssey is a really great experience. But just my favorite would always be Mario 64 because I was totally when I first played it, and I played it right when it came out, and that was just magical because there was nothing like it. In regards to the Switch version, yes, I think the analog stick is not quite right.
Mm-hmm.
Even it took me a lot of practice to get some of the stars that I used to get easily.
Mm-hmm.
Analog stick just doesn't feel the same way that I did on the N64. Yeah. And I think the issue that you guys, that more younger players have with it, is that the remaster on Switch is not really a remaster of sorts. Like it's high resolution, but it runs at 30 frames per second still. So it's not running at 60 frames per second, which is why Odyssey is so smooth. Because Odyssey is, and then you go back to Mario 64, and it's a little stuttery.
Yeah, well, there's also a little bit of camera angle things. I mean, it's not as polished as a new game is going to be.
You can control it with the stick and with the right stick on the newer games. And on the N64, Nintendo should have added that function in this port, but they didn't. So you still have to sort of hit the buttons to control the camera and the N64, which doesn't give you a lot of. Sometimes, yes, the camera is kind of weirdly placed in some key areas, and it's harder to jump across. Which wasn't a big deal back in '96 because nobody else had figured out how to do the camera back in 1996. Yeah, I can see how it is a tougher game. 64, mainly because of that, because the controls are not as refined, and because the port is not as good as it should have been. I still think Mario Sunshine is I don't like Mario Sunshine at all.
Agree. I tried playing that again a few years ago, and I just couldn't really get back into it. Although as a kid, I completed the game. But this time playing it at the special edition a few years ago, I started it, but just couldn't really get going. It was just a very hard play, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, it's an odd game. I would recommend right now, I would probably say pick up Odyssey and Galaxy. I think Galaxy is really good as well.
Absolutely.
Well, let me just chime in real quick. So I have actually been had a little more respect lately for the Mario 64 controls because I've been playing Banjo-Kazooie.
Okay.
And Mario 64's controls are still just a little bit better than Banjo-Kazooie's, even though they basically copied the game engine.
They were always better because Banjo-Kazooie, like back in the day, everybody was mesmerized because Banjo-Kazooie looks great. Like it looked really good.
Yeah.
Like it was a step up from Mario in graphics, but Monty's right. It never quite matched the type controls that Mario 64 had. It never really did. So platforming always felt better in Mario because it was more responsive.
Yeah.
And it always felt like it was weird. Like there was like a delay or something when I was controlling it. It just felt weird.
Yeah, but for the pick I'm going to have to choose for Mario, I'm going to have to go with Super Mario World for the Super Nintendo originally. Mm-hmm. That's still my favorite one.
I play that, but the problem with that game is hard because my kid cannot beat that. He's 6 years old, but he can't beat that game. So he has an easier time with Odyssey than he does with the previous Mario.
Super Mario World definitely has some difficult sections, especially with like the ghost boss type things and.
Yeah, it was a difficult game. It was not kids.
Okay, so I think we answered Jason's question. So yeah, guys, please chime in when you watch the video about which one you should get. Hopefully, I have the video edited and online before the 10th, because I have to put in the funny pictures and stuff. But so you might have already bought the wrong one first, but we'll see. But I guess another thing that I know, Sam, you want to talk about how Diablo 3 is not going to be on Xbox.
Baldur's Gate.
Baldur's Gate, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was watching the weekly episode of Digital Foundry, and apparently there's a press release by the company that makes Baldur's Gate saying that they announced it for PlayStation 5 and PC, but there's no Xbox announcement. And the reason that was given was that they could not get split screen, the multiplayer split screen mode. If you know, Baldur's Gate, it's like an action RPG, but your friends can join and you can play on split screen, and but it doesn't work apparently well on the Xbox Series S, the split screen mode. And
that's the lower powered one.
Yes.
Yeah.
And because Microsoft has the requirement that same requirement as PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 4 Pro and Xbox One S and Xbox One X, where it had to be basically the same game. Like, obviously the better system could have better resolution and better performance, but you couldn't have features in one system and not have them in another version of the game. You know what I'm saying? Like, both versions have to be identical, or else Microsoft does not approve the release of it. So that's why they haven't announced it for Xbox. So the big thing here is this going to be a common occurrence? Like, is this going to keep happening? Because games are only going to get more complex the further we move along. And is the Xbox One S finally holding the Xbox Series X?
You mean the Xbox Series S? Yeah.
Yeah, the Xbox Series S, is that finally holding back the Series X? Is it?
It might be. I just find it amazing how Microsoft always seems to shoot themselves in the foot with something, be it the Kinect or the Series S or whatever it is. They just always seem to shoot themselves in the foot somehow with the launch. So.
Yeah, but it's the Series S was a good idea because it's affordable. And Microsoft sold it as a replacement for the One S, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is that the PlayStation 5 is out there, and it's right now it's outselling the Xbox console. So the problem is that all these games sort of have the PlayStation 5 version as the base version. So it's not like before where they used to make the Xbox One S and PlayStation 4 base version, and they used to build from there upwards. Now they sort of make the game with the sort of the PlayStation 5 specs as base, and obviously the Series X can do it because it the hardware is up to the task. But the One S is sort of a lot further below both of those machines. So I think Microsoft should sort of backtrack on that and maybe say, maybe. In this case, maybe the One S version shouldn't have split screen, right? Wouldn't that be the solution? I think that's the solution for the problem.
Yeah, because I remember playing Baldur's Gate, was it 3 Dark Alliance on my original Xbox split screen, and that was a lot of fun. So it just kind of sucks that people on Xbox won't be able to enjoy it.
That's the point, because a lot of people really believe that is the selling point of that particular game franchise. The fact that you can play split screen. So that might be an issue, because apparently the rumors are that the One S has sold, like 50% of all Xboxes are actually One S. I mean, Series S, and then the other 50% is Series X. So there's a huge chunk of Series X.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that would be a problem, I assume.
Yeah.
But, it's just... that's just something that Microsoft should have thought about. Maybe put a little more or a better GPU on its system. But it might be the rank. Because the CPU is the same in both.
Yeah.
But
and then some other interesting news. So recently Square Enix released a game, you might have heard of it, called was it Forsaken? Or no, Forspoken.
Yeah.
Forspoken.
Yes. And they've already announced that the studio is closing permanently. I saw some screenshots online of apparently some retailers were dumping their copies in the garbage. I don't know if that's true or not, but if it's not, then some guy literally paid for like 7 copies to throw in a dumpster to take pictures. So
this happened back in the 80s.
Yeah.
With E.T.
Yeah.
A.T. game.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't played it personally, but from what I've read, some people didn't like the voice acting, the character, and like even some of the trailers that I watched were like super cringy. So I'm really not sure. I mean, you think that if they're trying to compete with like, let's say Dark Souls or something with an action RPG, why would they go with that character and all that stuff if their target market is going to be men ages, 16 through 30? Why would they go with? It doesn't make sense. Is there a big group of action gamers who are women ages like 12 through like 25? It doesn't seem to make any sense for the kind of game they made. Like it would be like making an American football game and trying to sell it in England. It wouldn't make as much sense.
You'd have an audience, but
the problem with that is that Forspoken was always a weird game because it was built on the same engine that Final Fantasy 15 was built on, the Luminous engine.
Yeah. And
that engine is notorious for being problematic because I don't know if you can recall Final Fantasy 15.
Oh yeah, Versus 13 Versus and all that.
It was Versus 13, and it started under Nomura, and then Nomura did Nomura things, and he was taken off the project, and then I think
then they gave it to that other guy, and then we didn't get any of the final DLC for 15 because he quit.
Yeah, it was a big mess, and apparently part of the mess was the engine itself. It was hard to develop for, and it seems that Forspoken, which is now Forsaken, I guess, has
oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, it seems like it always had sort of like when it first came, upon release, it had a lot of technical issues, and it still has technical issues. And from in a direct comparison, Final Fantasy 15 might actually look better in spots, even though it is an 8-year-old game made for the PlayStation.
I don't know about that. That might be a little bit of a stretch, Sam.
No, the characters look good, but no, the environments. You need to see the environments, and I think Final Fantasy 15 looks better than the environments. The character.
Well, yeah, maybe if you're running it on an Xbox Series X, not on original Xbox One, I would hope.
It's the place I played it on PlayStation 4, and it just looks. Because the demo was very underwhelming. The demo itself for Forspoken was very underwhelming. Okay. You could kind of feel that this thing was going to crash and burn at that point in time.
Kind of like how I felt when I played the demo for what's that Final Fantasy Origins, the Stranger of Paradise.
Yeah,
yeah. Some people really liked it. I thought it looked really bad for an Xbox.
But that's the game. I know there's going to be a lot of people in the JRPG group who are going to say, "Oh, you bastards, you're taking it on Forspoken because you." Are discriminating against the female character, but the fact of the matter is that her dialogue was cringy, like the written dialogue. It's not the actress's fault. She was just given crap, and she had to act whatever was written there that was just garbage, and it was cringy.
Yeah, like some of the little short previews things they made it was like, what? Who published this? Why would they allow that to be published?
I don't understand.
Like she's like does her magic powers. It's like, oh, that's a thing I do now. Like this isn't like a tween soap opera on TV like that it doesn't. This is really out of place for like an M-rated game.
Well, the thing is, this I guess this is part of the news. Luminous now went under because Square Enix dissolved the studio after the flop, after this flop. But I don't even know why Square Enix, like you say, would approve this as a AAA game, because you can say you can see that a lot of money was put into this and a lot of marketing. And it was just a bad game. Like, new IPs are hard to make a new IP and have it be successful. It's a very hard thing to do. And it needs to be really good because it is a new IP. Like Final Fantasy 16, hopefully it is great. But even if it's crap, it's gonna sell a lot of million copies because it's Final Fantasy, right? And it's a main number of Final Fantasy, so it's gonna sell at least, I don't know, 4 million copies, 5 million copies. But a new IP doesn't have that luxury of being bad and selling. So as soon as critics started panning the game, you knew this thing was going to flop because people were just not going to plunge into it. And especially because the trailers, like you said, were cringy and the whole thing looked weird. And then the critics panned the game and, you know, there was a lot of issues with it. So now Luminous Studios is over. They've been absorbed into Square Enix, and I guess the staff will be put into other projects. There is one more DLC coming out though for Forspoken because it was promised. Okay. So that's coming out in the summer. But I guess people should, you know, I don't know. It was just, Forspoken was just a weird thing all around. Just a weird concept. Just a weird all around. I don't think.
Yeah, and just even the way that Luminous was set up. I was reading that they basically took everyone from at Square Enix from the Creative Business Unit 2 and basically just removed them from the company and put them in this new Luminous studio after they all had built Final Fantasy 15 basically. Then they took them all, cut the DLC that was supposed to be for Final Fantasy 15, and now this is what they've been working on since Final Fantasy 15. And they're going to have to get rid of this whole game engine that they've been working on since Final Fantasy 13. Yep. And then I was also reading Square Enix has had more than 6 games in the last 12 months that have just flopped. Some of them I've not even heard about. There was what was the one? There was the was it First Soldier? Was that the one with there was the mobile battle royale game?
One of those games was canceled. I think one of those games. I think First Soldier.
Well, that's already been pulled. There's just been a bunch of games. They've just been.
Well, Square Enix is in a bad place right now because they sold. Remember they sold Crystal Dynamics and the Tomb Raider franchise. They sold it.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then first the company that bought it sold it forward, sold it. Went and sold the rights again for double the price that they paid Square Enix for.
And they didn't even release the game or anything.
No, but Tomb Raider, I don't understand why you would sell Tomb Raider. I don't. That's such a big. Even if it's on a lull right now, why would you sell a franchise that has film potential and TV show potential, and you can get royalties of all of that, and it's just a huge franchise? Why would you sell those? Right? I don't understand Square Enix at all. It just
exactly.
And then they make a game with a female character that was just weird, but they sell Tomb Raider. I don't understand. It's just contradictory, right? Because you have a franchise with a female character that is very popular, that is huge, and you just sell it, and then you release it with a female character that is turns out to be not that popular, and it flops. It's just weird. I think Final Fantasy 16
must be discriminatory. That's why. Forspoken didn't sell well. We're hateful, discriminatory people.
No. They're taking a leaf out of the book of the Disney Marvel tropes these days of just shooting yourself in the foot.
Well, that's what they're doing because I don't think they were trying to compete with Dark Souls. I actually think Stranger of Paradise was trying to get into that Dark Souls sort of niche, which is not a niche anymore. Yeah. It's actually quite big now, but big market. But I think Forspoken was trying to be more like Horizon Zero Dawn, if you guys in that game. It was trying to appeal more to the American public, I guess. And they were trying to do something like that, I have to assume, but it didn't work out. And now
that was one of their stated missions for I read that for the Luminous group was supposed to be international releases.
Yeah, so there you go. That they try, but it's hard.
I don't know.
It's hard if you're a Japanese company to try, and you don't bring people from the outside in, right? If you don't bring a developer from let's say the Horizon Zero Dawn team or whatever, and you listen to their influence, it's hard for them to make something like this because it turned out to be just a cringy game, cringy dialogue, cringy characters. It's just weird. To be honest, the Harry Potter game that just came out completely destroyed whatever hope for Spoken had of ever.
Yeah, why also Square Enix had to know that Harry Potter is coming out at this the same time basically. So why would they put it up against that?
And it's such a better game. It's
with a really loved IP. I mean, I mean, basically marketed itself.
Yeah,
so.
It's weird. It's almost like they were set up for failure, but well, Luminous is no more, and I guess Forspoken will be a dark chapter in the history of Square Enix at this point in time, and now it's all up to Final Fantasy 16 and Yoshi-P, who is also making news.
Yeah, I guess that's the other thing to talk about today is Final Fantasy 16. I didn't know it, but we're terrible bigots for having a group called JRPG Fans Only. Apparently, Yoshi-P says that this used to be a discriminatory term, JRPG. I don't know if I agree with that. What do you think, Sam? I mean, you wrote an article about it. We'll post a link with the video. But is the term JRPG, like he said, where it used to be like, oh, to differentiate it? I mean, obviously it differentiates it from other RPGs. Because, I mean, when it first came out, it was basically Japan, Europe, and the United States, and Canada. That's where they had computers and the video game systems. I think really the father of RPGs was, nerds in California at Berkeley, and then also Richard Garriott in the UK. He really created the modern RPG with his Ultima series. So I see from that perspective how, I mean, JRPGs are very different, so it makes sense to kind of classify them differently. But I don't know if I agree that it used to be a discriminatory term. Yeah, I don't know. It just seems like they're just starting to talk out of their butts a little bit with this Final Fantasy 16. First, they said that, the reason why there's not going to be any black characters or anything like that is to keep it more authentic to our fantasy Europe that we've created. When Europe used to be actually kind of, I mean, has always been had some diversity in it, A. And then B, this isn't really Europe. This isn't historical fiction. This is a fantasy version of Europe that you've made. That has no grounding in reality. Last time I checked, read a history book, the great crystals didn't all die, and that's why we had to use coal. So,
I'll let.
Well, hang on. First, there was that part, and now the JRPG stuff. I don't know. Are they just like starting to whine? Like maybe they need a new public relations team. What's going on over there? It just feels like it's distracting away from what should be positives.
Well, I'll let Usman give his opinion first because it's a very deep topic.
Well, I don't want to say it. There's a word that goes around these days which begins with W, but yes, it's those people who are moaning again about certain things when it comes to, political correctness. I think it's we can go down that rabbit hole for quite a while if we really wanted to. But
it is probably
well, I think the real thing will be we'll see the sales. Does it sell 5 million units even? I mean, we'll see. They're putting a lot of eggs in this basket, and I am kind of disappointed. I'm okay with the action aspect of it, but I wish you could like switch between party members or had at least AI party you could switch between, kind of more like a Star Ocean or Tales of kind of.
Is this for Final Fantasy 16?
Yeah.
16.
Yeah. I mean, I'm relatively new to Final Fantasy. I mean, the only game that I've played extensively is the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and right now I just started Crisis Core, so that's my first delve into Final Fantasy. I haven't actually played it before. I'm enjoying it. It's a franchise that I'm wanting to get into more and more, but I think actual Final Fantasy 16, I'm probably not the best person right now to go into it, but I'm getting into Final Fantasy.
Just wanted to go because this is a very deep thing, and I think I'm going to set the JRPG group on fire here with what I'm about to say. Yeah. I think, Yoshi-P, if you read in between the lines of what he said, and you read the question that he was asked before he said what he said, you realize that it's him. He's the one who feels offended by the term, because he feels that JRPGs are somewhat inferior to what's right now in this time and place to the Western role playing. That's what I'm getting from, and I'm explaining myself. He says that the term was invented 15 years ago, which would be 2008.
It's not true.
That's not true.
I mean, because you started Never Ending Realm in like 2003. 2003.
Yeah, so the term has been around for at least 20 years, right? But the 15-year mark coincides with the time where Japanese development as a whole became less relevant in comparison to the West. I don't know if you guys agree with this, but it's just a reality. In the 80s,
you mean like the kind of the PS3 era where there was basically no JRPGs?
Yes, because in the 80s and 90s were dominated by Japan. Really,
yeah.
The 80s and 90s. You know,
all games, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, the big money, the big titles, the big franchise, they all came from Japan. Like, because obviously Nintendo sort of saved the video game business as a whole after the market crash with the Nintendo Entertainment System. Then Sega came around, then Sony came around, and everything came out of Japan, right? But sometime around the mid 2000s, that decade, the West sort of started to take over. Like games like Elder Scrolls, Oblivion, Morrowind, Halo, even first-person shooters, they kind of took off. And suddenly, Japanese role-playing games were not really the top sellers anymore, unless you were Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest in Japan. Everything else sort of took a dive. Like Grandia died out. Star Ocean started to sell like very few copies.
Well, you could also argue that like Star Ocean 4, that wasn't a great game.
That's true, but that's the thing. Like he was asked, this is the question. Let me tell you the question that Yoshida was asked. He was asked, how did he feel that Japanese role-playing games had evolved? But they use the phrase JRPGs because it's easier to say JRPG than Japanese role-playing game, but it's the same thing. So he was asked, how do you feel that JRPGs have evolved, right? So there's so many ways he could have just answered the question, and instead he went on a rant about how the term was offensive. So it seems to me that he's the one who has an issue with it, because why would he go there? Like when he was not even asked about that, he could have just said, well, the Final Fantasy series, because he was being asked about Final Fantasy 16, has been trying to adapt to the times. Like even Final Fantasy 15 was an open world. We went we left the turn-based combat behind and we went to an action, regardless of how controversial that decision has been. He could have tackled this different ways. He could have said, From Software is doing a great job. They have done a great job with their Soulsborne series. There's so many ways. Nier is a Square Enix published game. Nier Automata.
Nier, or however you say it, yeah.
Which is an action RPG. So that's part of the evolution. Like JRPGs did not all of them.
Yeah, no one ever considers that Nier, however you want to pronounce it. No one ever not considers that a JRPG.
Exactly, and it evolved. It's not the same Japanese role-playing game that was being made in the 90s. It's very different. The gameplay is very different. It's very fast, very, very action-oriented. That's you could say, well, that's part of the evolution of because at the end of the day, whether he wants it or not, he's making Final Fantasy 16 is a Japanese role-playing game because it's being made by Japanese people.
Yeah,
it comes from Japan, and more importantly, it's Final Fantasy. Is that not the series that made Japanese role-playing games popular?
Yeah, we have the crystals. We're going to have the dialogue between the characters. If we just think of like something stereotypical in Western RPGs, there's no named protagonist, and there's no direct interaction between the character really with dialogue and the other characters like there is in a JRPG. And I mean, they're still keeping that aspect of it.
But the thing is that what is really a JRPG? Like what is it? Because people, there's always going to be a controversy because some people don't tell that it's a JRPG, right? But if you go back to the 80s, Miyamoto himself said, it's an action RPG. Everybody was inspired by Ultima, even Zelda, so at the end of the day, you could say, I always consider Zelda an action RPG. Just progression is different. It's not completely statistical, unless it's Zelda 2, Adventure of Link, that was a statistical. Everything else, but you still progress. You're still stronger at the end of the game than you were at the beginning. And it still has world building. It still has the NPCs, towns, everything else that was there. before. And if you go back that far, then you really like Alondra. Let's look at Alondra. Nobody in the JRPG group will ever say Alondra is not a JRPG, right? Because it was published by Working Designs, right? They're like, oh, Alondra is a JRPG, but it's a clone of A Link to the Past. So if Alondra is a JRPG, then A Link to the Past is a JRPG, then Zelda is a JRPG.
No, you're using too much logic here, Sam. It's too much logic for the JRPG.
But
that's not allowed.
The reality is that you mention adventure to some JRPG fans, and it's like you mentioned the devil to them. But for real, you mention adventure. Oh no, it cannot be a JRPG if it's action adventure. But was Final Fantasy not an adventure? Was that not the premise of Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy? You went on an epic adventure. I mean, that's the whole point. Yeah, the only thing was that you had turn-based combat and you had statistical with numbers progression.
Yeah, an RPG without adventure would be like a work simulator. It's like, today I have to go to my job.
So Zelda did action. They focused on action, while Final Fantasy did turn-based. That's how it started. And Dragon Quest did turn-based. So, I just read so many different comments. Like one guy even said that the JRPG was the creator of the role-playing game genre. I read that, actually. And I'm like, wait a minute, wait. It's the West. The role-playing games started out in the West, right?
Yeah, with Dungeons and Dragons. Then on the computer there was the Rogue game back in like the 70s.
But even the first Final Fantasy, if you see it, the artwork, everything was West. The castles, everything looked like Europe medieval times in the first Final Fantasies, right? It was not until the 90s that anime became sort of like anime style artwork became sort of like a standard for JRPG, for Japanese role-playing games, which was okay because everybody loves anime, right? And everybody did in the 90s. Akira Toriyama did the artwork for Dragon Quest.
Yes, Dragon Ball, Dragon Quest, quite similar art, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the same.
He also did Chrono Trigger too. That is very similar art.
Chrono Trigger. So then Final Fantasy VII, Nomura, his artwork is anime. It was a little more realistic in terms of proportions, but it was still anime, right? So that's where that comes from, but it doesn't necessarily have to be anime. Because before the 90s, Japanese role-playing games had more of a Western artwork as well. So this goes for the people who say Dark Souls is not a Japanese role-playing game because Dark Souls has Western. Yeah.
There's also Dark Souls really reminds me of that manga Berserk. That's a very dark kind of gritty. It also reminds me of there's this one manga and anime that's kind of quite a bit older that's very similar. It's a parody one called what's it called? Something Dark Snyder, and it's very metal, like I want to say like metal hairband, like kind of inspired by that.
It's not Fist of the North Star, is it? Or?
No, it's very similar though. Yeah, Dark Snyder is very similar to that one. But yeah, it's kind of that. It took like some Western influences that made it very unique and Japanese. So, and there's always going to be cross-pollination between different cultures with different things, and it creates new things. And I think we're all better off because of that.
But
definitely.
Yoshi-P does not want Final Fantasy 16 to be classified as a JRPG because he feels that people box the JRPG genre with anime artwork, teenagers saving the world, and turn-based combat. Obviously, Final Fantasy 16 is going to have more adult-looking characters, and it's darker, and it has action combat, and maybe that's why he's offended. Yoshi-P is, right? But he's not the only Japanese role-playing game developer who has done that, because Demon Souls is a thing, right? Even Alondra is a thing, and it wasn't teenager saving the world. It was a darker story back in the 90s. So he's sort of doing his own people, his own Japanese counterparts a disservice by saying that no, we don't want to be boxed into the JRPG term because I never thought it was an offensive term. I just thought that Japan has a rich history in game making and a rich history in role-playing game making. And so we always used to we have always called the games that come out of Japan, at least as far as I can remember, a Japanese role-playing game, especially when Morrowind came out and stuff, because that's how you differentiated stuff, like a Western RPG and versus a Japanese RPG. And they should be proud of that, because we could have been saying Asian RPG, but we never say that. We say Japanese because they have a rich history. So it's not, I don't think it's an offensive thing.
Definitely not.
It was never meant as an offensive term. I don't think, I never
and it's just like, kind of like how we use that to differentiate Japanese RPGs. Kind of like how we use the word manga or anime to differentiate those other forms of art.
Like,
absolutely.
Yeah, if a role-playing game comes out of China, then I guess I'll call it a Chinese role-playing game. See,
CRPG.
Yeah. But, it's just, I don't think, I just think he's too defensive on the matter, because maybe himself and even Square Enix want Final Fantasy 16 to compete against God of War and against Ghost of Tsushima and against Horizon and all these newer Western games that have become sort of the most popular games on the market at this point in time. And I guess that's the issue here. But I don't think he should have taken that as a slight or as an offensive term. He should have just answered the question, like, what does Final Fantasy 16 do or does that other Japanese role-playing games haven't? And maybe he should have gone in that direction, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And we would have been more excited about it. But still, he's a brilliant developer. He saved Final Fantasy 14 from oblivion, so there's high expectations for Final Fantasy 16 based on his work on Final Fantasy 14. So, I think it, and he has, we have an article on our site where he did say that he greatly enjoyed and maybe even admired Ghost of Tsushima. So, which was made by Western, it was a Japanese samurai game, samurai made by Western developers, right? So maybe he sees them as his competition, and maybe not the other, the Japanese developers as his competition at this point. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's what he wanted to say. So I don't know. It's just, I don't think it was offensive, and I hope that. And by that token, some of the admins wanted us to address the issue of the whole JRPG versus non-JRPG debate, right?
Yeah,
because it's becoming hard on the site to mod and administrate the comments, because some people troll, some people. So if you're gonna make a topic, let's say, I don't know, this is the thing. I think it's easier this way, because the term is too broad, right? A Japanese role-playing game, if the game has role-playing game elements, and it was made in Japan, and it was made by Japanese people, it is a JRPG according to our rules. So if you post something about Zelda, you shouldn't get
hate spam.
You shouldn't get trolled. You shouldn't be trolled.
Yeah. Oh, also, I would say we want to be just as inclusive as possible. So even Western games that are made in like 90s Japanese style, those are fine too. We're not going to exclude any Western game RPGs that are made in 90s Japanese style. We're not going to exclude those. So we want to be as inclusive as possible and just keep it from just becoming an angry ranting.
RPG. If you could just make even a small argument that it is a JRPG, you can post it on the site, and no one should report you. And no one should troll you.
Exactly.
So if you want to post Zelda, discuss Zelda, you can do it in the JRPG group. If you want to discuss Dark Souls and Elden Ring, you can do it in the JRPG group. And you should get no trolls. The comments will be removed if you troll, okay?
Definitely.
Because that's not the idea here. And the term is just too broad, because anything these days, all games these days, even I was playing Sonic Frontiers,
Oh.
you could say
Yeah, that was my reaction too.
It's an action RPG. You could say it. Because there is a statistical progression in it. Am I wrong, Usman?
No, you're absolutely right.
Sonic
I've been playing Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, and I guess you could say that's a JRPG too. Because
that's a total JRPG with a Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. I mean,
believe it or not, some of our group members will say, "Oh no, that cannot be a JRPG." But then the same people will say, "No, but to be a JRPG, it needs to have statistical progression." But they have a statistical progression. Sonic has a statistical progression. So what is it? My point is that a lot of games are bringing role-playing game elements into the fray now. So it just, the pool of games that you can discuss is broad. It's very wide.
Speaking of Sonic Frontiers, I'd say that's the most JRPG Sonic game probably ever made because of the different direction that they've taken the game. I mean, ironically, I actually just published a piece on Sonic Frontiers literally yesterday and just talking about the differences that it has to previous Sonic games. So you can tell basically on the side quests that the game has, the different things that you have in the game, that it's much more of a JRPG than previous Sonic games. And it's interesting because they're going down that kind of route with the Sonic games in the future. So interesting that you mentioned that.
I mean, you can upgrade his speed, you can upgrade his attack power and his defensive power from level 1 to level 99.
Yes, so exactly.
That's it. That's an
RPG, however you slice
it.
Absolutely. It has that in it. So I guess if somebody posts Sonic Frontiers in the JRPG group,
do you know how much hate
they would
get? You know how much hate they would get?
No, but it's a problem because people who haven't even played the game are gonna say, "Oh no, it can't be a JRPG because it's Sonic."
Yeah. Oh, well, there's still people who scream that Pokemon's not a JRPG. It's like, what are you talking about?
Oh god.
You know what hurts them? It's probably the most successful Japanese role-playing game ever.
Yeah,
that's true.
It is.
I mean, how many people did Pokemon get into in the first place into RPGs? I mean, it's just breathtaking. How many millions of units that game has sold in different versions?
Yeah, I mean, the games that Pokemon Arceus, whatever it's called, that came out last year, even again, that's very much even more an RPG or a JRPG than previous Sonic games. So you can see these long-term franchises that are moving more towards the JRPG role, the route.
Yeah. But Pokemon has always been a turn-based. I mean, before it was a turn-based RPG at its core. Like it was a pure RPG. Like you couldn't get more RPG than that. So that would be that. So what else did the group wanted to discuss?
I think that's good for now. We're about the 50-minute mark. I don't want to go too much longer because people don't watch that long usually. It's also I have to put in the pictures and stuff. So I think this is a good place to wrap it up. I want to try to do another one in a week or two. So we can more regular. Yeah, this is fun. So everybody, make sure to follow Never Ending Realm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and follow our JRPG fans only group. And thank you guys for talking, and I'll try to get this posted tomorrow, okay?
Pleasure to be here.
All right. Thank you.
See.
Okay.
All right, guys. Okay. Yep, you have a good night.
Bye-bye.
All right.